So we're here to talk about green building or green buildings, and I realized as I was going through them that it could be thought of in either way. It's what makes building green or what makes a building green, because building can be either a noun or a verb. So I thought that was kind of an interesting way to look at it that I had never really considered before. But we have several green buildings right on our own campus, and obviously it's becoming definitely the building way of the future, and there's a really good reason for that. Oops, I'm just going to minimize something here. Thank you. Okay, so here's some of the topics that I intend to cover. What is a green building, or what is green building? And why would we do it, and then how does it go about getting done? And then, how do we evaluate whether a building is green or not? And there's really almost unlimited ways to do that in a way. And then depending on what evaluation method you're using, what are the different elements of green building? And then I thought I would just kind of highlight some of the buildings that we have on our campus that we can showcase for people, to give them an idea so that they can go out and see one for real and live and know which one it is. So when you think of a green building, there could be lots of things that come to mind. Obviously, if you're a little bit younger and you grew up watching The Wizard of Oz like I did on Thanksgiving night, that was always a big highlight, because we didn't have videotapes back in those days. You couldn't just do it on demand. We had to wait until they were broadcast on network television. And so we had the Emerald City. This is a little bit more modern of a green building rendition. I couldn't tell you for sure if that particular facility actually exists. Here, I thought it was pretty funny. It's an actual life-size model of a Monopoly house that somebody has somewhere. I don't know if it's actually habitable or not, but it just really caught my eye. But of course, this building over here with the turf growing all over it, that's not that far off. There's plenty of things that that we can think of that have to do with what is green building and what is a green building. And green walls and green roofs are things that we definitely that can be employed in different manners. So I want you to just take about 30 seconds, just think of what kinds of things come to mind when you think of a green building or building green, and maybe go ahead and type that in the chat box, if you would, please. So actually, now I just realized that, let's see, can I see that? I should be able to see the chat box. With all my controls going here, I'm not sure I can even see that. Here we go, chat box. So solar panels, energy efficient, passive solar, environment, non-toxic building materials, environmentally friendly. Awesome, yeah. Obviously, they're all right. There's no wrong answer. And when I did a poll in my own household, which includes myself, another professional in the environmentally friendly industry, and then two college students, these were some of the words that we came up with. Necessary, lighting, eco-friendly, some of the same things that we came up that you all said. I think lighting was in here, skylights and solar. And so, hopefully we'll be touching on a bunch of these things during our presentation today. So what exactly is a green building? And that's a little bit of subjective. But in the United States, we have an organization called the United States Green Building Council. And they are, one of many organizations that kind of do that. And their website says that a green building is a holistic concept that starts with the understanding that the built environment can have profound effects, both positive and negative, on the natural environment, as well as the people who inhabit buildings every day. You can read, obviously you can read this for yourself, but I wanted to go ahead and share with you a little video that they have put on for this as well. Hopefully the volume is good.
Claim there is no volume, or at least we're not hearing it.
I'm sorry, I need to do something with the volume?
Yeah, we're not hearing anything from the video.
You're not, okay. Let me see if this helps. Let me rewind. Did you hear it that time? Austin, were you able to hear?
Sorry, I was on mute. No.
Oh dear. I wonder how I get that over there. That's funny because I hear it in my headphones. Let me try one thing with my speakers over here, and if that doesn't do anything, then I will just skip it.
Sarah Johnson in the chat said there's an option when you share your screen to share your computer audio.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Share computer sound. Here we go. Thank you, Sarah. Let's try this one more time.
Yep.
What is green building? It's an integrative process that focuses on the relationship between the built environment and the natural environment. Buildings can have both positive and negative impacts on their surroundings, as well as the people who inhabit them every day. Reduced energy and water use, healthy indoor environmental quality, smart material selection, and the building's effects on its site are key considerations of a green building. Sound familiar? It should, as these elements mirror the different credit categories within the LEED rating system. These buildings cause less harm and do more good, which creates a more sustainable environment for all. LEED acts as a decision-making framework for project teams during the life cycle of a building, which includes planning, design, construction, and operations. LEED rewards best practices, innovation, and recognizes exemplary performance with different levels of certification. In other words, LEED is green building.
Oh, too soon. There we go. So I actually didn't make this full screen intentionally because I was just so excited at so many YouTube videos that came up when I was searching for this. And there was this one, I'm going to try to put together a list of a bunch for when we get this posted. But there was this one, this first one that was the next one that came up. I just happened to watch it as I kept on going. And this guy's actually talking about net positive buildings. As opposed to net zero, and it was really, really fascinating, and basically talking about buildings that have, that take a negative building, off of the face of the earth and put a positive building in there. And I found that really fascinating. Okay, so let's get back to our presentation here. So we're going to just kind of go over some of the different evaluation methods and organizations. So there's many different organizations worldwide that encourage and showcase, certify, rate, whatever you want to say, with the development of green building practices. BREEAM, or some people pronounce it BREEAM. I have never actually heard it pronounced, but it's one of the programs from an organization called the Building Research Establishment Group. And they were one of the first ones that were established internationally, and because they recognized a need to and a value of evaluating building materials and construction methods. In the United States, we mostly recognize the most widely recognized one is the that organization I just showed you, the United States Green Building Council, and their program is referred to as LEED. It stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. And it's still currently the most widely used one in the United States. It's very well recognized. You may have seen some of these emblems that they award to people or organizations or buildings when they're been constructed and recognized. One interesting thing about the USGBC is they kind of sort of have two branches. They certify buildings, but they also do credentialing for individuals. So as you'll see us talking about a little bit later, you may actually have heard of somebody being a LEED AP or a LEED Green Associate, and that's by the same organization. It's just kind of two different pathways, if you will, of getting towards green buildings. But they're related, but they're not exactly the same. Most of these ranking evaluation organizations, they have different multiple components, and for the most part, they kind of sort of get to the same thing in probably a pretty similar way. But for example, the World Green Building Council has up to 17 different categories that they rate on and rank on. This particular graphic only shows some of the ones that they did and how they could be, what the different rankings could be. So for LEED, LEED focuses, they have primarily 9 different categories. They have the sustainable sites, water efficiency, energy and atmosphere, material resources, indoor environmental quality, innovations in operation and regional priority. And then they also have a couple things that aren't listed here is the integrative process, and actually so regional priority is kind of lumped in with this. And those are two categories that you don't really get a whole lot of points for, and they're you kind of either get them or you don't. So there's not really a lot of leeway in there. As far as for LEED different kinds of rankings, they have rankings for different kinds, like different buildings and different kinds of buildings. So, but they also do it for, so you can do building and design and construction. Residential homes would be a kind of a different ranking category. Interior design is a whole different other category. They do one category that's operations and maintenance, including on an existing building. It's like if you already have a building that wasn't necessarily LEED certified when it was first constructed, but you're operating it and you've really fine-tuned it in a good way in the way that you maintain it. You're using eco-friendly cleaning products. Then you can get it certified after the fact, and the campus is working on some of those. New development is one of the categories that they have, and then they also have something called campus certification, which so California State University at Northridge is in the process of looking into seeing if we can get our campus certified as a LEED campus. And what that does for us is in the future, if we build any additional buildings or if we decide to go for the existing building certification, it says, hey, this particular facility, this group of facilities has already met these certain criterion. And so you don't need to qualify it every time over and over and over again and redocument it. For example, your particular location and how close it is to transportation. Well, that's always going to be the case. And we're not going to build a whole new bus stop someplace else just because it needs to be close to this other building. That doesn't make any sense. But we've already taken all of these steps. So we want to get credit for taking those steps and having them in place. So that's one of the other things that we haven't quite gotten there yet, but we're definitely working on. So while participating in one of these rating systems is voluntary, with whichever organization you want, you still have to comply with building codes. Now, the United States doesn't actually have a national building code or an energy code per se, but instead it's pretty much left up to state and local governments. And they tell them they can either choose one or the other of a couple of things. One is they can choose to go by by ASHRAE, which is the American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Engineers, or there's another organization, the International Energy Conservation Code, and those are both established, recognized codes that states can choose to model their building code after, if they should choose. Or if they want, they can develop their own, but it has to be at least as stringent as those. And of course, being in California, where we where we try to do everything bigger and better, at least certainly with regards to the environment, we have our own. And what it is it's our whole building standard is called Title 24. Title 24 of the California Code of Regulation, or sometimes people refer to it as the California Building Standards Code. And Part 6 and Part 11 are the ones in particular that have to do more with building green buildings. So Part 6 is the California Energy Code, and Part 11 is the California Green Building Standards Code, and sometimes people refer to that simply as Cal Green. And they address the need for regulation to improve energy efficiency. And it's interesting to note that in the last 40 years or so, since Title 24 has been established, and they upgrade it and kind of tweak it a little bit about every 3 years. So, but in the last 20 or 40 years or so, California's per capita energy consumption has dropped by 24%. Versus for the same period, the last 40 years for the rest of the country, it's only dropped by about 4%. So obviously our codes are working. I even think I heard somewhere along the way that some states are starting to look at California's Title 24 to adopt it either in and of itself, and or possibly even just do another version of it. So there's different elements of building green or a green building, and I kind of lumped them into categories that sort of made sense for the purposes of talking here. The organizations lumped them up in other different ways, but for the most part, you get credit for being in different locations. And like I said, one thing that you may or may not really have much control over is where you are in a community. If you've got to build a building someplace, where it needs to be, that's where it needs to be. But if you're looking to place something, like you're a large corporation and you're looking to, build a new warehouse, and you know the general area, you might be able to get more lead points by building, say, next to a like maybe taking out an old warehouse area and rebuilding that, and making it better or greener than if you started with what they call a whole greenfield site, where it's just a totally natural facility and you're going to come in and concrete it over. And geographic, obviously you have certain restrictions. The climate has a little bit to do with that. And as far as your location, your orientation, and how you face your building, even north, south, east, west facing, all of those elements can affect your building performance. Occupant comfort is obviously a very big one that everybody's pretty familiar with. You've got your indoor air quality, your temperature, your humidity, any kind of other elements of air quality, such as particulate or VOCs, or if you've got any other kind of vapors going through the air. A lot of times that happens when you have brand new materials in a brand new building, but one of the things that green building does is it tries to minimize those kinds of human impact. Of course, you've got your lighting and even acoustics. So people, that's another thing that people don't typically seem to notice if it's done well in the first place. But if it's not done well, then and the occupants can really tell. You've got your resource efficiencies. I just happen to list the utilities in particular right here, how you're using your water, your electricity, and your natural gas. And that's not only just during the operation of the building, but some of that has to do with during the construction of the building. How are these elements being considered? Here's where we get into your materials. Are you able to reuse any materials from a site that was either already there. Say if you tore down an old building and you have ground up the asphalt and or the concrete and reused that in the construction of your new building. That's very common practice. The procurement of your materials, did you have to ship everything all the way over from China, or were you able to source some of it someplace more close that didn't have as much of a carbon footprint as it was getting over to your construction site? And what about the sources? Were they, did you order all of your fabric from, a sweatshop in a third world that uses, child labor? All of those things can, affect your green building rating. And then, of course, I touched a little bit on earlier about your operation and your performance of your building. So that would be the operation and performance of your mechanical equipment, as well as the way that you actually take care of your building. If you're using, good green cleaning materials, how you're maintaining your landscaping. Are you using, you know, pollinator friendly, pesticides, or preferably not using pesticides at all? Things like that, they all go into consideration of green buildings. So this is just a sample of a checklist. Like I mentioned earlier, the USGBC LEED has these different categories of ways that they can be rating the facilities, and this scorecard that I put up here happens to be for building and design, new construction, and major renovation. This is one of the ones that we typically use the most around on our campus, obviously. And we do have, occasionally we have major renovations, but definitely for new construction. We, excuse me, the California State University system has, mandates of us doing, we have to do even better than Title 24, which is obviously the minimum building code for the state of California. But we also have a requirement that we have to build at least to LEED gold standards. I didn't actually cover that too much in the very beginning, but LEED has kind of 4 different categories. One is just LEED accredited, and you have to get a minimum of, I think, 40 points in order to qualify for that out of 110 points. And so they have just accredited, and then they also have LEED, silver, gold, and platinum, which platinum, of course, is being the best. And each one of these 6 categories over here, they all come over to 110 points, but the distribution of the points in the various categories changes depending on the kind of building that you might be building. So I was just going to go ahead and go over some of these categories. So for sustainable sites, and I kind of lumped it in with location and transportation. So here's where you can get credit for being in the neighborhood development location is, what kind of a site is it located into? Are you going to be bringing jobs into a community that doesn't, have a lot of, good quality jobs for the people that are there? Have you protected sensitive lands that were in the local vicinity? What's the density and the diverse use of the lands around you? And our bicycle facilities, are they close to you? Because that's a transportation consideration. And oh my goodness, green vehicles. I don't know why that formatted like that. But and is it close to public transportation? If that were necessary. And then sustainable sites, here's construction activity, pollution prevention. So in each of these categories, some of them have requirements. So in other words, you have to do this. You have to, whatever this is defined as, you're required to do that, or by the way, you can't get certified. And some of these other ones, they're all, extra points. And so you try to get as many of those as you can. But you can get, you might be able to get all of these points down here, but if you haven't done your pollution prevention during the construction, then it automatically just negates all of your other efforts. As far as pollution activity, something that's, just real simple to think of is making sure that you're keeping dust control down while you're, dampening the ground so that you're not polluting the air around you as you're actually constructing your new facility. Heat island reduction, that's something that we think of even on our campus as a lot of with our tree canopy. And trying to minimize the black asphalt that we use in our construction activities. So for indoor environmental air quality, this one has 2 requirements, and you have to have certain performance and environmental tobacco smoke control. In California, that's not as much of an issue for us because, of course, we don't allow tobacco smoking in the inside of buildings, and theoretically for a certain number of feet outside the doors, but that's not often enforced. And then, how many different kinds of strategies do you have? Here's your low emitting materials. Like I said, especially when you're building new buildings and you've got carpeting and you've got a lot of, upholstery on your furniture. There are definitely products out there that are much more friendly for your environment than maybe more traditional ones. And to seek those out and use those is going to be better for you, not only getting your building certified, but it's going to be much better for environmental health going forward. Your indoor air quality management plan. Here's your thermal comfort, and here's your daylighting. Trying to make use of daylight as much as possible, and and even putting in controls to be able to control for daylighting, as well as other types of lighting controls, such as being able to shut it off with occupancy or whatever other controls that you have. And here's the acoustic performance. Make sure that people have appropriate atmospheres for whatever the venue happens to be. So I kind of have 2 slides on this one. They're pretty similar. So for resource efficiency, like I said before, I kind of just put all of the utilities into this one category, and they have a lot to do with the operation and performance of your building. So here's your outdoor water use reduction. And again, these are requirements that you've got to be able to meet these definitions for your particular building type in order to even qualify to be certified as LEED. Your building level water metering, you have to have building level water metering basically. And that's one thing that, we have started putting into our construction requirements as the CSU and certainly CSUN as we're working together with our architects on our new buildings. Indoor water use, outdoor water use, the possibility of reuse. That's something that we've been looking at quite a bit. How can we reuse some of our water? The water that we get from LADWP, they don't supply reconstituted water, reclaimed water, like what some people refer to as purple pipe. They don't have the capability to do that right now. Other campuses are able to take advantage of that. So we have to try to look and be a little bit more innovative in some of the things that we're trying to do. So we've looked at things like reusing condensate from air conditioning systems, or we're actually in the process of trying to do a study for our cooling tower water reuse. The operation of cooling towers kind of loses water in a couple of different ways, and one way that we might be able to reuse it would be instead of blowing down the water when it gets too concentrated, could we maybe reuse that for irrigation on something, because it's not a small quantity. And like I said, I just put the 2 different graphics on here. So for energy and atmosphere, we have 4 requirements here that absolutely need to be met: building minimum energy performance, building level energy metering, fundamental refrigerant management, and I don't know how many of you may have heard of. There's an organization called Operation Drawdown, and it's a nonprofit organization. And one of the first things that they did after doing some research was they published a book called Drawdown, and it lists the top 100 ways that of changes and things that are affecting our carbon footprint and the greenhouse gas emissions and global warming. And the top #1 way that they said was to be, really vigilant about our refrigerant management, because refrigerants have such a profound impact on the environment and our and the ozone and the greenhouse gases. That's really, really critical, and it's kind of a small thing. Most people don't think of it because most people only pretty much work with their own personal refrigerators. But in industrial operations, that's a really big deal. Enhanced commissioning. Commissioning refers to the way that you actually start up the building once it's all been constructed, but prior to occupation, you need to go through and make sure everything's working properly and that you're you know, starting the systems the way that they're supposed to be, and making them all work together instead of just turning everything on and kind of hoping it meshes. Energy performance, I don't know if you noticed, but this is 18 points right here out of 33. That's a really, really huge one. And it's one that a lot of it can be done fairly simply and relatively inexpensively if you've, already got the equipment. Some of it is a little bit less of the low-hanging fruit. Some things you might have to spend a little bit of extra money on, but keep in mind that over time, on your energy performance, that's going to save you money over time as well. So it's usually money well spent up front if in any way you can afford to do that. Advanced energy metering, that would be in addition to up here the building level energy metering. Demand response, we don't really need to get into that. Renewable energy production, though, that's definitely a big one. That do you have anything associated with this particular project? Or even if you're not doing it with this particular project, does your site have renewable energy they're already producing that that maybe could be accredited to this project? For example, CSUN does have a little bit of solar on campus in a couple of different places, but by now all of that solar has been allotted to our lead building. So if we built another lead building, we would have to build additional solar in order to qualify for that. How am I doing on time? Okay, I think we're doing okay here. This is your materials resources. Did you reuse products? Like I say, if you reused building materials, or in a lot of cases, if you can purchase used equipment, or even not purchase it, but in the case of CSUN, we frequently have warehouses full of furniture that has, been taken out of whatever facility. Is somebody trying to talk? Okay. Somebody's taken it out of a facility, and if it's still perfectly usable, let's hang on to it and see if somebody else can take advantage of it and use that instead. And then again, the transportation of how far did it come, and what transportation modes were used to do that. And construction and demolition waste management as well. Even if you're not reusing the materials, what happened to the stuff that was used in construction and demolition after it wasn't being used on the site, or after it left the site. And then finally, we kind of have these other little miscellaneous categories. For innovation, you can get up to 5 points for having something that wasn't already listed on there, but maybe you have something that's kind of a new technology that's coming out, or an innovative way of operating your building for whatever reason. Maybe say you have a door that opens in one of the rooms, thinking of a conference center up at UCLA, and and so now you've got basically an outdoor space, but it's undercover, and so maybe that might be a more innovative way of using something. Here's where you would use that LEED accredited professional. As I was saying, LEED, as they certify buildings, and they and they credential professionals. So you can get you can get a point just for having somebody on your team doing that. And then regional priority, those are kind of things that you don't really have much control over. That it has a lot to do with just where your building is geographically located. So at CSUN, we do have several LEED buildings on the campus proper. We have our Sustainability Center. We have the Extended University Commons. Let's see, the Sustainability Center is LEED Platinum. Yes, very exciting. And we have the Extended University Commons, Student Recreation Center, the Soraya Center for Performing Arts, and there are actually 3 buildings up at Housings, building 19, 20, and 21 were built LEED Gold as well. So here's the Soraya, our Performing Arts Center. Just in case, I realize it's possible that there may be people on the on the webinar here that haven't been to our campus. So here's our LEED Gold Performing Arts Center. Over here is our Sustainability Center, our LEED Platinum building that also happens to be net zero energy and performing very well. Down here is our Extended University Commons. And I don't, you can't really tell over here, but part of one of the credits that they got was building a courtyard in part of the first floor. So they actually have a courtyard study spaces out there, and I think some of the classrooms can actually kind of spill out into the courtyard for that. And then we have our student recreation center. When it was built to LEED Gold standards. So let's see, I was going to go over just some of the elements of our LEED, here we go, our LEED Platinum Sustainability Center. This is right on their website. You can go on there. They have a virtual tour that's even pretty interesting to look at. So some of the features that qualified them for LEED Platinum was they took advantage of daylighting. As you might be able to notice, this building has an awful lot of windows, pretty much for about 3/4 of the way around it. And in addition to daylighting, they have controls, very sophisticated controls on sensing the daylighting, occupancy sensors, and what lighting they do have is LED. Very efficient lighting in itself. A lot of those windows are actually operable windows, which is not always typical in, especially in academic settings of buildings. For various reasons, because you don't want people leaving them open just because they felt like it, or if you were in obviously a K-12 school, you don't need children hanging their hands out the windows. But this building does have operable windows so that they can use those and in order to get the, either the warmth from the outside or either the cool from the outside into their building, to have to use their HVAC systems much less. And the HVAC system is actually tied into these windows. So if you're trying to cool, if the building needs cooling and it's cooler outside, then letting the cool air in is fine, and the HVAC can keep on doing and cooling the building. But if it's warmer outside and somebody has left the window open, the HVAC system isn't going to kick on and start pouring cold air outside, to air conditioning the rest of the world, as my father used to say. This facility has gray water collection and reuse. So all of the water that's used in the kitchen area and the restroom sinks, they collect that water and they're able to use it for irrigation of the grounds there. It's a special system. It's on its own controls. It has a filter in it, and that helps them cut down on using potable water for their irrigation. Low impact development landscaping. So their landscaping is all very drought tolerant. And part of the reason that they got points was where the Sustainability Center was previously an existing paved service yard devoid of landscaping. So again, like I said before, sometimes you can get credit for beautifying a facility that may have already been there that wasn't particularly environmentally friendly at the time. And then their mechanical measures, the HVAC system that they have, it's basically a heat pump, which if you're not familiar with a heat pump, it works as an air conditioner when it's warm, but the air conditioner runs in reverse when it gets cold, and you can actually draw heat in from the outside air, especially in Southern California. And it's got a feature on it called variable refrigerant flow, which is very efficient. They have 24 kilowatts of solar power on the roof, which is how they're able to get to zero net energy. The solar produces a little more than what they need maybe in the summertime, and so that's where the term net energy comes in. The zero net energy helps it, when you're overproducing sometimes, but then you can kind of bank it, if you will, and use it for later. They also have, that's not in the picture here, but they also have solar hot water heating, which is something else that you may see next to solar photovoltaic cells that you see sometimes, or the panels. You might see something else next to it that looks a little bit like it because it's kind of just, black, but that's actually what we call solar thermal. And so they use the sun to heat their hot water in that building also. All of the furniture in the building was just from someplace else. They, just went shopping in the warehouse. And something kind of unique in this particular building is we have vacuum composting toilets that they take all the waste and they suck it out of one room and put it into another area where they can compost it, and it breaks it down with the use of aerobic microbes, along with, they kind of cook it a little bit, and then they can reuse it as compost for the soil. So let me just get back to my presentation here, that we are pretty much about done. And yeah, actually we are done. Just about 1 minute over. So I did see some things pop up on the in the chat box. So let me see. Oh, Sarah misses the campus. So actually at this point, I'll go ahead and go down through what's in the chat box already and try to address things. But if somebody wants to, to chime in and unmute themselves at this point, that's perfectly fine. I've always wondered how much it costs to get LEED certification in our buildings. Is there a cost difference between earning the different rankings? So there isn't a cost difference for earning LEED certification, other than, in order to get a better performing building, you might have to buy more expensive, better performing equipment. For example, windows, dual glazed windows. Dual glazed means you have 2 layers of windows, and those are pretty much mandated for their performance on, for insulating properties. But sometimes you can get actually 3 layers of windows. Well, obviously that's going to cost a little bit more than just 2 layers of windows. Or you may have windows that have a particular kind of inert gas in the middle of them, argon. Sometimes windows are filled with argon, and that helps. So it's not the certification per se. The certification process itself still costs the same, but to actually get your building performing to where it would, reach those certification levels is where the extra costs come in. Oh, and I'm sorry, Austin already actually answered that. I didn't get down that far. Maybe I should read better. Let's see, do we have buildings on campus that meet LEED standards but are not certified? Actually, that's been something that has kind of, the CSU system has been kind of, they've been kind of talking about that a lot lately. There have been several campuses that have claimed that some of their buildings were built LEED equivalent. And yes, it is possible to build a building that could pass the LEED certification, and you don't actually go through the certification process, because the process does have a certain fee associated with it. And I would say probably on the CSUN campus, we probably do not have any that are built to that. Well, we probably do have some that are built to silver equivalent, yes. But we wouldn't actually really know that, again, until we went through the process of certifying it. And so going forward, the CSU is trying to justify going through the certification process, because even some buildings that everybody thought that they were, if you don't actually go through the process, if you don't, check all the boxes and cross all the T's and dot the I's, you don't really actually know. The costs to go through the process itself is not, if you do it from the very beginning and you just kind of keep track of all of your documentation along the way, it's really not that much, much added cost relative to the cost of the entire building. Okay, so that one, can houses, yes, can be LEED certified. As I showed on one of the earlier slides, there is LEED certification for residential housing. Let's see, how much more does it cost? Well, that's really totally dependent on the building. I mean, if you've got a 300,000 square foot library, it's going to cost you several $1,000,000 more to go from LEED to platinum, versus if you've got, a sustainability center that's, how big is that building? I think it's probably like maybe about 6,000 square feet at the most. It's only going to cost you maybe a couple $100 extra to go from, to get from, gold to platinum. Let's see. So typical campus building. Oh yeah, so the actual process of doing the certification itself is, yeah, about $20,000 to $30,000, and that does change a little bit. Again, like I say, I mean, if you've got a really huge building, you're going for platinum. There's a lot more things that have to be evaluated, so it does cost a little bit more for that.
Colleen, do you mind if I chime in real quick on that one?
Not at all.
All right. So the cost for us we don't actually have like a lead expert on campus, and for our buildings we typically obviously hire contractors to build our buildings, but we also hire a consultant to help us go through that lead certification process. The consultant we've used in the past couple of projects has been Brightworks, and they're actually the ones working with us right now on the campus-wide lead points project. So there is a little bit more of a premium that we pay to have someone help us with that process. But I think that price I gave, and there is probably pretty close to ballpark, obviously depending on building size, like Colleen had mentioned.
So, and I don't see anywhere in here, but if anybody wants to unmute themselves and start up a conversation, that's perfectly welcome. Oh, Austin, would you mind please also putting in here before we forget the link to the CSU, the site that has the link to all of the Earth Day offerings, if you get a chance to copy that real quickly. So this is just one of Cal State Northridge is doing several dozen presentations throughout the month of April as our contribution to Virtual Earth Month. And Austin was kind enough to go ahead and consolidate a bunch of the other campuses, sent us the links to their presentations, their Virtual Earth Month offerings, and we consolidated them all and put them on the CSU system website, which you can go there and see there's a really wide variety of topics being offered throughout the whole system on 23 campuses throughout California. So I'll stop talking if anybody else wants to unmute themselves. Well, everybody's good. Well, we do have our contact information up here. Eventually this presentation will be posted to where you can go back and review it. And you can contact us at Energy and Sustainability or directly to me. The Energy Sustainability email is monitored by our team, and the Sustainability Center, certainly if you want to visit that, if you're at the CSUN campus, either when it opens back up and students, well, you can go there now technically if you wanted to, but even if you happen to be listening on from somewhere else that's not necessarily a CSUN community member normally, we would be happy to have you come through there. And they do tours, especially if you give them a little bit of advance notice. It's a nice facility, and there's students working in there, and it's actually it was built and it's owned and operated by Associated Students. So that's kind of their showcase building.